Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sydney Ramirez. I work here for the ULI Southeast Florida Caribbean team, and it's with great pleasure that I introduce Adam Green Vader. He's very involved with a lot of our Caribbean initiatives, and I'm sure you all have heard of him or know him decently well. And take it away from there, Adam.
I would like to introduce our amazing panel, and Emily will go through the bios, but I think you're going to find today just a very diverse and insightful group of individuals, really leaders in their respective fields, coming at you from many different islands and perspectives, all to discuss the future of Caribbean housing. So without further ado, Emily, please take over.
I'm very excited to be introducing three leaders in the industry from the Bahamas, the Caymans, and Jamaica. We're going to start off light here. You know, I want you guys to kind of introduce your island. You know, what makes your island unique regarding whether it's investment opportunities or development, you know, in culture and society. Carlos, why don't we start with you?
I think, why would you not be in the Caribbean, right? I mean, we saw in a global pandemic that countries are locked down, air travel stopped. Why would you not want to be locked down in paradise? So between Cayman and Jamaica, I think you have a great representation, and obviously the Bahamas, of what paradise can look like. I think the Caribbean is a wonderful place to live, work, study, and of course play. And with our countries, you have so many islands. The Bahamas is a country actually with 700 islands and about 2,500 keys. So we have a lot of everything from little rocks that you can buy and own your own private island on. And my background is one of those such islands, to obviously massive mega resorts like the Atlantis that some people might have heard of, or Bahamar. So those are $4 billion resorts with aquariums and slides and things like that, sort of more of a Disney World experience. So I think the Bahamas gives you a good balance. You can be in a rural town one day on one island where basically there's minimal development, to your own luxury private island, and there are numerous celebrities and high net worth individuals who have islands obviously throughout the country, to once again the whole resort type of experience with massive casinos and great gaming and wonderful live shows and great entertainment. So I think you get a good mix. And I think as a part of the Caribbean diaspora, we all come together to represent a brand. We are all impacted by similar things: climate change, hurricanes, inflation. We have small countries for the most part relative to other places. I know Jamaica is a bit bigger than the rest of us, but we still all have the same types of challenges with workforce and labor. And so we all are sort of in it together as small island developing states. And I think that it's a great time to have more dialogue like this, where we sort of cross collaborate, we cross notes on some of the big exciting things, as well as some of the small day-to-day things that we all can be doing to be better. So whenever you are in our neck of the woods, where you're probably flying over us if you go anywhere else in the Caribbean, I encourage you to stop down in the Bahamas, give us a hail. You have a friend here if you ever need anything, and looking forward to a great discussion today. Thanks for letting me go out the gate, Emily.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. No, I agree. I 100% agree. I mean, there's so many opportunities in the Bahamas, and here, Gary, go ahead and take it away with Jamaica.
I think we just need to print and publish what Carlos just said, because if he didn't sum it up, I don't know what else will. But no, I mean, more specifically, because I agree wholeheartedly. Everything Carlos said was dead on. And I think, you know, where Jamaica is concerned specifically, you know, we're uniquely positioned geographically. I think it's ideal for easy access from North America. I think also, you know, the fact that we're English speaking is helpful in for investment coming from especially coming from North America. I think Jamaica is underdeveloped for the most part. I think that provides a host of opportunities, not only in housing, but tourism sector, healthcare. There's a host of opportunities here just because of the sheer nature of kind of, I guess, where we are in you know, on a global scale. So, you know, as Carlos says, not without its challenges, not without its risks. I mean, we've been battling issues like crime and stuff like that over the years. But we are making massive strides in that respect. I mean, I think ease of doing business has improved like exponentially, at least in my time in the last 10 years. There's been marked improvements in that regard. So I think that as far as like a market for investment, for developers, for contractors, for people in the built environment, I think that there's enormous opportunities here, and likewise across the rest of the Caribbean for sure.
Awesome. I like that you said that Jamaica is underdeveloped. So there really is a lot of opportunities for people to really get creative in terms of, investment opportunities or new project developments. That's a really good point. Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. Obviously, I do agree with everything that's been said, and everything's been set out nicely. I think the fact that we're all quite close in terms of Jamaica and Bahamas and the Cayman Islands as well, we probably have more
similarities than some of the Eastern Caribbean. One, as Gary pointed out, us all being English speaking, and as you can probably tell, I am actually English originally, and having only been here for 12 years. What sets Cayman apart, I think, is that it's not solely reliant on tourism or some of the other aspects that some Caribbean islands tend to lean towards. It's strong financial services here. Obviously, they have that in other islands too, but it's a leading part of the economy, and that has a huge influence on investment, a huge influence on property, and a huge influence on development here. So that's very important. I think Cayman is a little different, particularly to somewhere like the Bahamas, because we're a teeny island that's kind of set out on their own. Well, I say a teeny island, there's three, but the space between Grand Cayman and Little Cayman is 80 miles. So we don't have any immediate neighbours, which in itself poses certain difficulties and hurdles to overcome for development of property itself. So it makes it a little more interesting. And that also sets us aside, I think, from places such as the Bahamas and Eastern Caribbean, where you have different sort of style communities, where you have the yachting communities. We don't have that either. The one thing we do have is very strong infrastructure here in the Cayman Islands, and that is key, I think, here to development. That and thankfully we have a relatively low crime rate here. I know Gary touched on that. It's always a concern, but to date it's been fairly well controlled. I mean, that is probably down to the fact that we have a very small population size here compared to Jamaica and even the Bahamas. In terms of other unique investment opportunities that would impact Cayman Islands, I think it's important now that there's a focus on health tourism here, and we're now I think 6 years into having a large hospital built by Indian investment group, and there's 2 more large hospitals planned. So that adds another different aspect to investment and property and development, and I think the perceived impact of the island from investors, developers, and indeed people that want to come and live here, because health and safety play a big factor in people's decisions of how they want to live and where they want to live. I think that gives a good overview.
That's a really good point. And that kind of segues into my next question. Even before the pandemic, during and after, How do you guys, like, are there specific challenges that, you know, especially with the Caymans, small island, you know, maybe sourcing material, you know, skilled labor? How have you guys combated a lot of those challenges that we faced even before the pandemic, you know, developing overseas in the Caribbean, as well as after? Michael, I kind of want to go back to your point, kind of talking about, you know, small infrastructure, fantastic that you guys have infrastructure to really help with development opportunities. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more as kind of the challenges you guys have faced and how you guys, and how that has to do with, you know, the housing industry in general?
Yeah, the pandemic, it's obviously had a big impact everywhere.
In Cayman, we've been fairly lucky in that we effectively controlled the virus, and we didn't have it in spread in the amongst the local population. And what we did then is closed our doors, so we became a little enclave on our own, and that really helped, I think, foreign investment afterwards, because of the way the government managed to contain the virus for so long, and we almost were perceived to be a safe haven. Obviously, we're much in the same boat as everywhere else in the world now. But I think more to your question, which was about how the infrastructure was affected, because of where we're situated, everything comes on a shipping container, or by air, of course, but for development, shipping by air is not really feasible in the most part. And as everyone I'm sure is aware, global shipping costs during and after the pandemic and still today are very high in compared to the pre-pandemic times, you know, 3-4 times as much as they were. And it's not just the cost, it's the availability, it's getting shipping containers, it's trying to get goods on boats. Because of the size of our island here, we're very small and there's not much produced. I think maybe Jamaica might not have such difficulties, but still, I think around the Caribbean as a whole, we rely on imports. So there's been a huge impact, and you know, one of those has been time delays, another one has been cost. So that's probably I think how the pandemic has impacted on the infrastructure.
Gary, I know, you know, with with CSI, and kind of building overall with your experience with the construction industry for the last, you know, 15 years, can you kind of touch base a little bit of what Jamaica is doing and kind of how we're combating those challenges? You know, are we utilizing new technologies? Are we, you know, integrating different, you know, ways of doing things overall in the industry?
So interesting. You know, the pandemic, as destructive as it was to Jamaica and well globally, but you know, and as Michael touched on, there are increased you know, hurdles that have been introduced since the onset of the pandemic. What I've found is that especially some of the more substantial players, in all sectors in Jamaica, the hotel side, the housing side, those who could have continued to invest. In fact, the investment has increased. I mean, we CSI specifically, and a lot of other construction companies here in Jamaica have more than doubled or tripled their scale. You know, just the sheer volume of work is enormous, and I see that happening in other islands as well, where we've been invited to bid on a number of projects in other islands in the Caribbean. So it is, I find that, you know, as destructive as it was, and as much as it has impacted certain elements of construction and development in across all sectors, I think that it also has blown it wide open in terms of opportunities. I know for sure that the ones with the stronger balance sheets, the ones that had some reserves, they have used them. I mean, quite a few. I think everybody's kind of gone into it with the mindset that it's temporary, right? So I don't think anybody really could forecast exactly how long it was going to last for, or is going to last for, talking like it doesn't exist anymore. But the challenges, I think, for the most part, were the perception was that it's not going to be forever, and people have taken advantage of that. I mean, in terms of utilizing technologies and increasing efficiencies, that's a whole other can of worms. I mean, we've been pressing in that direction long before the pandemic, and I think that because we operate the way we do, I think that has helped us a lot through the pandemic, and allowed us to scale efficiently. I mean, growth is one of the hardest things to manage. It's bad enough when you have challenges and disasters, you have to manage that, but growth is equally as difficult. It has to be disciplined. You have to ensure that you can recruit at the right pace and train. You have to ensure that you have the cash flow to manage the growth. I mean, I've seen people go after opportunities and just implode. And it's really, one of the things that I guess a good problem to have, but one of the things that we have really been focusing on over the last couple of years in the middle of all this disaster that's taking place within other industries and stuff like that.
So Jamaica has found a way to really utilize it it's not obviously a positive thing, but to its advantage, utilizing those opportunities and seeing where we can kind of grow from there. So Carlos, go ahead.
Well, I just was going to say for the stronger ones, right? Because the weaker ones, I think that, it pretty much, killed quite a few people in the industry as well. So I don't say that across the board. There was the stronger ones that were able to sustain it. I think they have really taken advantage of the opportunities.
Have you noticed a trend in anyone being able to kind of bounce back as the pandemic has kind of, we're in a kind of different place than we were last year? We're still, working through it, but are we finding a way to really, mitigate these challenges do you think with people who are a little bit smaller, with less capital or less resources, are they finding a way to bounce back?
Well, yeah, I think the more resilient and the ones minded in that way, they are definitely. And the reason for it also is that a lot of our numbers now, both on the tourism side and other areas, have bounced back to be stronger than pre-pandemic numbers. I know that's the case also in Turks and Caicos. Was just there recently on a business trip, and the government officials there are they're blown away by what has just transpired over the last few months of the season. So I think that's also going to create opportunities for those that are still strong, that still have it in them to keep going.
Right. Carlos, you have a lot of expertise in the engineering and sustainability side, right? So regarding a lot of the developers that you're communicating with, developers that you're partnering up with new projects, you worked on so many projects all across the Caribbean. Are you seeing these developers, along with the challenges of skilled labor, construction costs, along a lot of things that we're all facing? Are you seeing more integration with people focusing on green building, sustainable technology, things like that?
Yeah, Emily, I think that, and Gary touched heavily on it. The pandemic has obviously been a chance to reset. It's been a chance where I think because our borders were closed, everyone realized that this is a temporary condition. A lot of companies were able to regroup and restructure, and it's been busier now than ever before. With the recent hurricanes that have been passing through the Caribbean, so heavily, it's been a chance for us to realize that climate change is definitely something that is happening, which meant, to your question, that the green focus starts to become a part of the reality. How can we lessen the footprint of our developments? Like, we obviously do work. We do about 250 projects a year. Our offices are in Turks, St. Kitts, and in Miami. So we kind of span the breadth of the Caribbean. And what we've seen, especially with some of the larger brands, both hotels, we also do a lot of work for the cruise ships, especially their private island work. And they obviously have been taking an intentional stance towards trying to be more environmentally conscious. You know, you hear a lot about cruising and challenges with some of the steps that have been happening in the past. And so I think the narrative is getting very ESG focused across the board. There's also a significant push toward carbon footprints, especially on our large developments. They're conscious of it. They want to know what their carbon footprint is. They want to ask questions around carbon credits. It's still very early, so there's not a whole lot we can do, but the conversations are happening in a way that we didn't see before. We have a few other pivots, like we have a hydroponic farming business, as well as a sustainable manufacturing business. And in those worlds, a lot of our relationships are with the hospitality industry, and they were interested, one, in supporting local-based businesses, primarily because they understand that it helps the economy, it reduces the overall footprint on imports and things like that, which is very positive, as well as your end of life. So how do the products that you provide to them end up being recycled, reused, or effectively disposed of? So I think this is a good time to be in the industry. One, I think that the strong do survive, as Gary would have alluded to. The reality is that the trend and the interest of the Caribbean is only going to continue to increase. We have, for example, a massive development here by Joe Louis and Tiger Woods called Albany. They exceeded all of their targets in COVID, right? And a major part of it was because these are obviously high net worth persons who would traditionally go to the European market heavily. But now they didn't want to fly there. There was so many, so much uncertainty with restrictions and quarantining, et cetera. So they came to the Caribbean. So they came to the Bahamas, they came to Turks. Cayman wouldn't let them in, so that was fine. Cayman keeps their money anyway, Michael. and so they came down to the Caribbean. And so what we found, though, is they fell in love. So right now, we actually have a shortage. I have just in my deck a short list of 26 clients who are looking for private islands. I can't find them. Awesome. 26. One of them bid on an island, for example, in the 2020, won it, and he got an offer for double what he paid for it. So it just shows you that sort of very high net worth Caribbean experience is something that is in high demand. They want it green. The island behind me is over yonder key that runs 100% on solar and as well as wind. It can run on either with backup generators, et cetera. So that's another example of the direction where persons not only want to build in a traditional way, but they want to make sure that their footprint is green, and they want to tell their friends. They want to bring people and show them what they've done. So it's a great time to go green.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I mean, Gary, are you seeing a lot of integration with green technology and green building in Jamaica right now? Or is it kind of, we're slowly going up the mountain? Are we really moving at the speed that we should be moving, or what's your opinion?
Truthfully, I think we could move a lot quicker, but you definitely are seeing it. You definitely are seeing it now. Buildings that want their LEED certification and various environmentally conscious building approaches and stuff like that. Obviously, on the housing side, only really kind of in the upper end markets, right? So again, the affordable housing markets tend to focus on just getting it done at the absolute lowest cost they possibly can get it done, and that's a whole different animal. But certainly in the hotel side, on the hotel side, we are seeing it for sure, and it's it's amazing. We love it, but I think it could, I'm hoping, as Carlos said, it's kind of early days still, even though, technology is there, and I think people are a lot more aware. It's still, I wish it would pick up pace a little bit more.
Regarding housing, are you seeing more incentives at least being talked about on a government side, or whether it's lenders or the government, in terms of incentives for ESG, for us to integrate it more within the housing sector? Or is it really something that they're still not having those collaborations and those discussions?
In Jamaica specifically, I think we're a little bit behind time. Certainly with the government preaches it, but I don't know that we really have any policy in place or any specific incentives that are going to drive any great deal of activity in that direction. I was just reading an article in the paper this morning where a developer was a large landowner in Montego Bay who was also a developer. He was giving it to the government about what they should be doing or what they could be doing to make it a lot more attractive. As I mentioned to you before, and I've been involved in affordable housing and large scale projects. I mean, in 1992 we started a 10,000 house development here in Jamaica in Portmore, and the margins are very thin, right? So all the help you can get on import duties, all the help you can get on even titling and that sort of thing, it's critical, right? Because you're really gonna make the money on the volume, and you need to try and drive down the cost any way you can. Certainly building systems and stuff like that, our building approach for that development was more like a manufacturing business than a construction business. I mean, everything was like literally a manufacturing type arrangement. Only thing is the houses weren't on conveyor belts, but the trades were, it was those are the ways to really deal with it on the mass housing side. But yeah, I wish I could say more about government being a little bit more friendly to us in that regard, but
no worries. So definitely a focus on kind of the production manufacturing houses out of necessity. Michael, what are you seeing in the Caymans right now regarding integration of ESG, integration of sustainability, and maybe government incentives or fiscal incentives?
I mean, the government is definitely talking about how it can improve, and there's a plan in terms of incentives for developers.
Incentives. There's that lean towards the green side of things. I think there's nothing really available that is driving that side of the market. I think the initiative is consumer led, and I agree with Gary. It is towards the upper end of the market. People are conscious and do want that kind of technology. We have certain constraints here. We have a monopoly power company, for example. So they have a big say in solar power regulation, for example. That is changing, particularly as battery technology progresses, and more and more developers, homes, condos, and commercial here are bringing in a lot more green technology, particular solar here. I mean, I assume it's the same across the Caribbean, but with 300+ days of sunshine, we really should be taking more power from solar, and the technology is getting better. But I think it is largely consumer led, which is driving developers to include the efficiencies within the building. And it's not just the solar, or another technology here is the geothermal for the AC. It's efficient building techniques as well. Certainly, there's been a lot more efficient building techniques introduced in recent times. Buildings themselves are a lot more efficient and therefore require a lot less power, and that's something that's certainly moved on in the past 5 to 10 years a lot. But I think it is consumer led rather than government led, and there could be more help, more incentive from government, and I think there certainly will be, but it hasn't been fully figured out sort of how that's going to happen. Whereas I'm sure you're more used to in the States having a program set out and a lot of different options available to you.
So what you guys are telling me is we need to talk way more so we can figure this thing out. So, I mean, I want to open this up to all three of you, right? We have so many opportunities in tourism and the financial sector within the economy. This seems like a really good opportunity for, you know, our islands as a whole to kind of figure out a way to diversify the economy regarding technology. I mean, what are your opinions on just kind of diversifying in that capacity and exploring these technologies? I know solar, I agree with you. I mean, we're in a prime region to really hone in and develop solar technology on a massive scale. Are we sourcing, you know, within? Is it, you know, locals that are kind of working on these projects? Are we collaborating with other islands, collaborating with other regions? I'm going to let you guys kind of take that away. Anyone who wants to jump in.
Sure, Emily, thank you. I think it is consumer based. I agree fully with Michael and Gary. For example, my house runs on solar and it was very expensive I mean, there's duty free. So, you know, even bringing it in duty free, it's still very expensive, and the batteries and the system and the software. So I think it's not so much that people wouldn't want to, but I think it's just not affordable. And the challenge is, like, for example, the Bahamas has 400,000 people, but we have about almost 8 million tourists a year. So it's just so disproportionately, the consumers of most of the resources in our country are not locals. So that's where it's the hotels, you know, our hotels, some of them have 4,000 or 5,000 rooms, right? So they are the ones, obviously, who are heavily dependent on the grid, for example. So unless they sort of take a corporate stance where we are going to run our entire hotel on solar, a lot of and then by bringing that demand in, it will then obviously allow it to be cheaper for locals. But just the buying power of our local community is so small relative to the need or even the demand. So if you look at the percentage of the grid, for example, which once again is monopolized, and our power company is also our regulator. So, so they regulate themselves. So you can imagine where there could be challenges with that. Where they, you know, want to use bunker C fuel rather than allowing people to use solar. So like I said, there are ways to do it now, but when you look at the percentage of what is consumed by the local community versus the tourism sector, it really will have to be let's call it corporate Bahamas that comes together with the private sector, with the hospitality industry. But we're seeing it, and that's the point. I think these things just take longer than we want, and things do move slower. I like to call it Caribbean time. So we move at Caribbean time, and a lot of times there are legislation that has to be changed. So people mean well, but there's certain things that have to go through the process, and then elections happen and those types of things. So that's one side of it. And then secondly, right now is a very expensive time to get into anything battery related. I mean, we've talked about it extensively, but the cost of everything to do with technology has significantly gone up. I mean, just laptop computers, servers, everything, right? So I think we'll have to see some fall off before we can get large scale integration. But I see it happening, for example, in the next decade. I don't see it within the next 2 to 3 years.
Awesome. Gary or Michael?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think here we do have a privately owned solar farm here,
and they sell to the power company. So there's been a start, and now there's another plan that's there's been I think an RFI put out. So we're looking at some more. there's challenges that come with that as well. Obviously, if the power produced here is green, then it enables everyone on the island to become more green. I think it's somewhat difficult, you know, to do the same sort of challenges that Carlos pointed out. One, it's a monopoly power company, although the regulator is independent here, which is that's a little surprising to hear they regulate themselves. But there are restraints with that as well, because, you know, introducing solar without battery technology, and you're talking about it with the existing grid system, there's going to be problems for surges, for downtimes, and it's how do they combat that? It's the same problems that you'll have everywhere else in the world, but to implement the technology here will be more difficult and indeed more expensive because of our situation and our location. So yes, there's been movement towards implementing a more green environment, but I think certainly it has to happen more quickly, and it does have to be government led.
Gotcha. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in Jamaica specifically, we're super incentivized to use alternative energy, simply because our energy costs here are the highest probably in the world. I mean, what we pay for electricity in Jamaica is off the charts. It's insane, which makes it very difficult, you know, as a business operator to have that cost, you know, driving all your overheads up so high. But as Carlos pointed out, I mean, the cost, although it is coming down, it's still out of reach for many, and I think that that you know, definitely slows up its integration into the markets. I think what we have done though heavily, and I don't know if the question was really focused on just energy alone, but where we have found we make headway is even in just how we plan our projects, and how we're even some of the building technologies, we're using, you know, less equipment, less movement of material. So the heavy machinery is not the project is not as reliant on some of those things. I mean, there's, you know, we're using EPS panels now, which two guys can lift up with their hands and set in place, as opposed to a crane that used to come with, you know, steel formers. So just different things like that. Even also just, you know, for the larger housing projects where we have a lot of earth moving and stuff like that, to really kind of sit down, plan that out on the engineering side, to spend a little bit more time on the front end of the project to ensure that, you know, cut and fill is done more efficiently, that sort of thing. So, you know, being able to just implement alternative energy options has been slow and been difficult, but I think we've made some headway in other areas that has helped us to not only be more environmentally appropriate, but also for us to reduce building costs and you know, get stuff done.
That's awesome that you pointed out with cut and fills, especially with the topography. That's a great way to save on hauling. So that's a really good point. Regarding just housing in general, so are we seeing, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So for example, BIM technology, right? That helps right there in terms of the approval process, permitting. Is that something that you're seeing all across the board or in one specific island? You know, obviously cost is super, you have to be very mindful of cost when it comes to energy efficiency. I think that's global, but especially in the Caribbean, just sourcing the right, you know, contractors, the right materials for any type of energy efficient building structure. Are we at all collaborating on the ideas out there? Like, for example, I know 3D printing. I know that right now is top tier, along with, you know, solar and sustainable energy, but eventually we're hoping that it'll trickle to the masses. But like 3D printing, is that something that you guys are aware of? You know, they're talking about it being, you know, at the end of the day, becoming that cost efficient opportunity? You know, is that something that you guys are kind of collaborating on at all, or is that something that's been, you know, you have your eye on?
So for me,
Either anyone.
yeah, no, well, I mean, yeah, you touch on nerve, because for me, I mean, we've been trying to really push BIM in our business for years. I mean, I can't even tell you how long now we've been pushing it, and it's been difficult getting the market to really embrace it. I mean, I can tell you, like, even the design professionals, the engineers, the architects, MEP, you're seeing more and more now some of the more progressive firms using them, and so on the construction side or on the project management side, they're super helpful, right? So besides allowing us to get accurate quantities and stuff like that, we're also able to do you know, any kind of value engineering. We identify conflicts and stuff like that long before we reach out into the field, which are a lot easier to resolve and a lot less expensive to resolve. So we see just massive benefits using BIM technology. We so much so, I mean, when we're on a project with a design team that's doing everything in 2D, we take our own in-house guys and create the models. So, you know, I mentioned to you the other day when we were talking, there's a project we're on now, in a hotel project in Negril, where the design professionals have models, but they won't give us the models to build from as construction documents. They only will, so there's still this kind of apprehension. They will give us the models, we have to sign a waiver saying we're not going to use these as construction documents. So it, for us, I mean, definitely nowhere near 3D printing yet. Still trying to get the BIM to you know, BIM across the board, and just get people to realize that the benefits are just, I mean, they're so obvious and there's so many. So it is something that we have been spending a lot of time on. And then what you're finding also is, like, our project management software integrates with some of them. I mean, like Navisworks and Procore are talking to each other, and it's starting to now make the whole thing just way more powerful, and allows us to do things that, you know, would have taken us plenty more manpower and certainly a lot more time than we are able to do them now. Our estimating software, all of these things are now integrated. The estimating software that we've been using for the last 6 or 7 years has now just been bought by Autodesk. So you're starting to even see the bigger companies really taking it on and trying to integrate the whole shebang, which is great for us. But nothing on 3D models yet. You can tell me more about that later.
Hey, Emily, you're muted.
Sorry, I was gonna say, don't worry, we'll get 3D printing in the conversation soon.
Yeah.
So Michael or Carlos, are you guys seeing any, I mean, I go back to Barry really quickly, that obviously helps with overall cost. You know, you're building faster, you're building more efficiently. So overall, there's a huge incentive, right? So with Carlos and Michael, are you seeing this integration slowly trending upwards? I mean, it's very effective, right?
Yes, definitely. Gary, if you need that those BIM models done, you can give us a call. We'll get it done for you. So we transitioned the entire company over to BIM about in 2012, actually, when they first started it. And so we exclusively actually design in BIM, 3D models as well as Revit 3D, etc. We also do LiDAR, a lot of LiDAR mapping with drones. We also do a lot of coastal data collection. And what that means is we can integrate all of that into one model. So when Gary comes and he now needs to design or build this, let's say this pool that's hanging off a roof, or a helicopter pad that's somewhere, or this big massive building, it's already all integrated into one model. He can cut it as he wants. He can create his own sections. He can get his material takeoffs, etc., automatically from it. And so what we found is that's allowed us to have great relationships with contractors like Gary, because many of them are obviously coming from very large projects, large countries. And so they often are a bit lost through, let's say, the permitting and the quality of drawings, et cetera, that you'd get when you work in the Caribbean. So what we've really tried to do is to make sure that we at least keep up with global standards and global trends. So we actually do 3D printing as well at our manufacturing company. So we check those boxes. And to put it into context, like so we have 60 people at our head office in Nassau, where I am based, and then, like I said, other offices in the Caribbean. And the average age in the office is 29, to put it into perspective. So we have a very young company. We train straight out of high school, straight out of college. And so most people have either interned with us before, or they've integrated with us ahead of joining us as staff. And that's the only way we've really been able to keep up with growth, because it's just so hard to find the labor force. And why that's important is because young people keep up with technology organically. So we have a lot of young guys and ladies who are gamers, for example. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down and the countries were shut down, I bought just a bunch of those virtual reality glasses, and we just gave them to people and said, go figure out this metaverse thing. I have no idea what it's about, but figure out how to make it. I heard something called digital twins. I Googled it. This is what it is. And so our team actually make buildings in the metaverse now. So they can send our client virtual reality glasses that they can walk them through the model. They can go outside and it's their real topography because it was recorded with a LiDAR drone. They can take them offshore because that's real bathymetry that they recorded, so they can see where their marina will be dredged, etc. They can do a flyover of what the actual building would look like once it's constructed. And what we found is that the industry wants value. And once they get some physical representation that makes their life easier, now they can present that to their board of directors. And that even to their investors. So we make those videos as well. And it took off. So BIM is something that we are 100% support. Like I said, we do it on most of our large projects. Largest are anything over 100 million. And so it's something for sure that the industry enjoys, and it's being done in the Caribbean. So if you need it, give us a call, Gary.
I love that. That was great. Oh my goodness. Michael, go ahead.
I think Carlos hit the nail on the head there when he said the average age of his company, and I can see exactly
why it's big and why they use it. It really is. It's a technology that I think is evolving, and it's being driven by the younger generation. Over here, we have kind of a very old school mentality. A lot of the construction companies, development companies have been around for many years and are quite set in their ways. It's not to say we don't have BIM technology over here. The major player in the market over here is a company called Dart, and they're one of the major landowners, private landowners in the Cayman Islands and elsewhere in the world. They have a lot of other landholding too, and they have a staff of must be close to 1,000 people now, and the development that they are doing on the island is generally for themselves. So it's a build to rent, either commercial or residential. And I know that in-house they very much use BIM and all the new technologies that surround it. I think when you move besides those, when you move into maybe the smaller developments, and by smaller, some of these are still 100 million plus. The BIM technology isn't being used, but I'm finding that the contractors that are coming through, the younger contractors, people that are coming from places where they've been schooled in BIM technology, are keen to use that. And indeed, the architects and the designers certainly now are moving to offer that. Even the local firms are using the Revit, the Bluebeam, the BIM, and I mean, I can certainly see the value in that as a developer, as Gary mentioned. So I think it's going to be driven by two ways. It's going to be driven by the younger generation insisting it's going to be how they work and operate, and that's just the way it is. And then it's going to be the contractors, the developers that realise the worth in it. And I think as time goes by and as the market evolves, it's going to be the only way that buildings are constructed.
You guys hit the nail on the head there, because that segues perfectly into my next question. I mean, what is the advice for the up and coming generation? As a young developer myself, we are ready to, you know, come like fires all over the place. So we really want to make sure that, you know, is there a market for the up and coming generation, which Carlos, you've already touched base on. That's amazing. You know, you guys are really integrating our generation into these solutions. You know, we really want to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. And this industry is a little bit archaic, right? We're very slow at moving and mobilizing into the direction that we really need to do, because we have a lot of people at the top that, you know, we're really traditional in how we do things. So, I mean, Carlos, you've already kind of touched base on it. So what's your advice for our generation? You know, we obviously want to integrate more collaboration. This was so fantastic. I love this. Thank you guys so much. But are we grooming a new generation of developers? That's the first question. You know, here in the States, we absolutely have, you know, programs, you know, universities for real estate development, but do we even have those kind of conversations with up and coming developers in the Caribbean, as well as how we can foster more collaboration to help really facilitate these solutions?
Sure, great questions, Emily. Thank you for that segue. I think it's about being intentional. And I think it's about realizing that if you want to be a leader in your industry or make a meaningful development, you have to keep up with the trends of your industry. What we found is that oftentimes there was a disconnect between what sort of we would do in the technical space, like engineers, et cetera, and what the owner actually would understand. Like at one stage, they just wanted to get the project done. Just get it done on schedule, get it done on budget. I don't really care. Just make it look good, but just get it done. But I would say over the last maybe 12 years or so, and we've started our company in 2005, so we're not an old company by any stats, but we've been around long enough to understand the quick, rapid transitions in the market. It's been where they now want to understand. Like there's a lot of questions, they want to be involved. And like a lot of our projects have almost become artwork, if that makes sense. And we're not design architects. So we often will work with design architects, and normally those are global leading architects. There's a handful of them who do most of the projects, and then we would do the production work, et cetera, and all the engineering, project management, all those other support services and permitting. So for us, it was, well, how do we marry the art that these world-class designers come up with so that it's buildable? So Gary is a contractor, he's used to concrete and steel, and there's some weird shapes and things hanging around, and they want this created. So how do we figure it out? And we do that in a 3D space. So what we did is we realized that engineer or architect or environmental scientist, because we have a strong environmental scientist team way of thinking, isn't always it. And we started to actually bring in team members who have backgrounds in art, and who have backgrounds in creativity, and who have backgrounds in rendering. So we stopped focusing so much on, well, okay, you studied construction management, therefore you're a construction manager. No, you actually studied art history. Okay, so maybe you would be right to fit on this project. And then we can cross-train you with project management skills, or do a certification, or do your PMP. So once we started that, let's call it a flow. And we found that, especially with the younger workforce, because that's what your question is about, and I'm a millennial as well, there's less of a focus on a career. Like, I don't want to just be a civil engineer for 30 years and only design stormwater drains. They wake up one day and decide, I want to go fly the drone, or I want to go model in. And so how do we keep them engaged? And with that comes company-wide training. With that comes heavily surveying. And no way are we perfect, but we have a strong HR team that allows us to integrate with a strong IT team. And that in-house capacity allowed persons to find their passions. So in terms of the industry in the Caribbean, I think once we continue to understand that our people are actually our first clients, not our clients. Focus on your people, make sure that they are happy, feel fulfilled, that they are getting the continuing education, you're sparking their interest, you're pushing them, they're getting the level of creativity to express themselves. And then we find that the client interactions improve, and then we find the quality of service improves, and then you bring in a couple 40-year guys as well to give you that technical strong background, but there's definitely space for young people in this technological age to take it and soar, because the old guards can't keep up. They're not in the metaverse. So this is the time for the younger generation to really go and soar, because that's the way the industry is going from what we see.
I'm ringing the bell. I'm ringing the bell. I agree. Michael, Gary, go ahead.
I mean, I agree with Carlos. I think the funny thing is now that whilst the older guys have the experience
and certainly can depart their knowledge, it is up to the younger generation to come through and in a way teach the older generation about the new technologies, because you know, just simply working in the industry, you might not always know about the latest and greatest technology and how it can improve, you know, an age-old business. But it's not just about introducing that technology. It's being able to translate that to someone that maybe isn't as technologically advanced as you guys. I mean, you know, you're brought up in a world where technology is second nature, and it's how do you relate that technology to the industry, and it's learning ways to, I think, integrate the new methods into the old methods and improve everything that goes on. I mean, you know, I think there's going to be a certain trepidation with everything that happens, and Carlos is you know, is very bold in what they do and how it works, and I think that's great. But I can see certain parties wince as they talk about the art and the curves and these, and you think, how the hell are we going to build that without increasing our costs dramatically? So it's how do you integrate the new technology and explain how it can be done without increasing cost, and you know, indeed how it can make the old practices obsolete and through new efficiencies. I think it's important to do that, but it's a strange situation, because I think in a certain way now it used to be, whereas the experience taught the young. I think in a lot of ways now it's going to be the young are going to have to come through and teach the grey hairs a little bit more, you know.
Love it. I love it. Gary, go ahead.
So yeah, I'm usually the one at the front of the line flying the technology flag, but I think it was covered so well by Carlos and Michael a while ago. I would say if I had to, you know, advise up and coming developers, especially interested in our region, you know, there's so many different aspects to developing, or even if you're just contracting or anywhere you fall within the built environment. I think that you know, for me, it's been very kind of eye-opening working across islands, because, you know, market conditions, although we're all in the same region and although we have so many similarities, the market conditions vary from country to country drastically. I mean, I sat with heads of government in Turks and Caicos recently, and one of the ministers made a point that people at lunch had more debt, personal debt, than the country itself. I mean, the country just has no debt, right? So they're incentivized to do things with a developer different than maybe you would be in Jamaica. So if Jamaica, you come and you have a project and you're bringing the financing as well as the design expertise, as well as, you know, filling a gap in the housing market, say, for example, you know, you're going to be, it's different things are going to drive different people, and it's really to kind of understand that really well, and whatever your vision is, to just kind of make sure you're not trying to get a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, you know. you know, that's one aspect of it. I think that certainly, and to jump back on the technology, but it's you know, whatever it is you're getting into as a young up and coming person, you can't ignore that. I mean, the technology and the even the new building methods and new materials and all of that sort of thing is something you need to just become intimately you know, in touch with, because it's, if not, you're going to have a hard time. And I agree with Michael, and not only in Cayman, but you know, the old school approach, I think still prevails more than you know, and even to get them to embrace new ideas and new thoughts has been very difficult. I mean, I could go on and on. I could tell you stories that would blow you away, but it's like it's kind of a balancing act, right? You need to know who you're dealing with. You need to know who your audience is, and you need to know how they're minded. And there's nothing wrong with trying to get, you know, some new techniques implemented, but you also have to be cognizant that, you know, it's not going to work. You know, all things are not for all people. So I think that there are huge opportunities. I also think that one of the most untouched things is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Emily, is really just collaboration between the islands. And especially now we're seeing with the supply chain challenges that exist coming out of the pandemic, I believe that there are ways that we could work together. I mean, if a ship is going from the Eastern Caribbean to the United States, it's passing so many different ways. There's ways to reroute things. And I mean, we have ships coming here or going from here, coming back here, and some of the legs are empty, are dead legs. I mean, you got empty ships going back and forth. That, to me, that just blows me away. But because, you know, and I've even tried to see if I could put two, you know, hardware people together to collaborate and see if we could work on the logistics. And it's almost as if like, no, that's my competitor. You know, they don't really kind of want to work together on that. So I think there's a huge opportunity for up and coming people to take a different approach and hopefully break down some of those barriers that I think are just you know, holding us back.
I 100% agree with everything you guys said. I think, especially as an up and coming developer, that is one of the biggest reasons why I wanted us to get here today and really let's start collaborating way more than we have even scratched the surface. I mean, there's so many opportunities. This industry is so vast. So there's so many specializations. So collaboration, I think, power in numbers, especially in our region. So I thank you guys so much for today's discussion. That was so fun.